Hello everyone and welcome to the Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers and I'm joined by Gail Schimmel. Hi Gail.
Hi Fiona. How's your writing week been going?
Quite exciting because I'm at the end of a project. This is a thriller that I've been writing for more than a year. It's over the 100,000 word mark, which is a lot for me. And I've been having to resist my besetting fault, which I've talked about before, which is to rush the ending. So I had an idea of how this was all going to wrap up, and I'm trying not to be like the horse that is smelling the stable and starts to gallop. I'm trying to just calm down, let it be, not rush it, and wrap everything up properly.
It must be particularly difficult if you've already got 100,000 words in the bag. So you're like, I've got enough words, so let me get there.
Yes.
There's the stable.
Yes, that's the other thing. I'm like, I've got plenty of words, but I know I'm going to cut because I haven't gone back and looked at this at all. So I know there's going to be a lot of trimming and cutting and a lot of extra fat that needs to be trimmed away. So I'll overwrite. I'll go over the 100,000 word mark and just try and chill and wrap this up properly.
That is very exciting. You know that we are all waiting for this book. So please, I know you don't want to race towards the stable, but if you could reach the stable at some point so that we could get the book at some point.
And Gail, what about you? How's your writing week been?
So I had quite a nice thing happen this week, and it doesn't happen to me very often. Now, I don't know if I've ever spoken about Elizabeth Gilbert's theory of how stories arrive. She thinks that they float through the air and that they arrive into a writer's head. And if you're willing to receive it, then you will write it, but they'll move on if they don't. And obviously,
so someone else will get your idea if you don't take it.
It was not your idea. It was never yours. It was floating.
Oh my goodness, that's very stressful.
And it came to you. If you weren't ready for it, it floats on to the next person. I mean, no disrespect to Elizabeth Gilbert, but obviously that's absolutely crazy crap. But that having been said, that is how short stories happen for me. And I don't often get a short story land in my head, but when I do, it's very exciting because when I do, it's completely compelling. And I had a short story arrive in my head this week, and it was with that compelling force that I just had to write it. And one of the things when I write a book, I know how it ends. With a short story, I often really have no idea what I'm doing. And it doesn't matter because if it goes nowhere, and I was looking in my folder of short stories and a lot do just fizzle out into nothing. Maybe they go to somebody else's brain. But when I get it just comes to me and I write it and it's like vomiting, and it happens in the way I think writing always happens for some other people, that it leads you and it shows you. And this one then turned out to be really sad.
Oh,
like really, really sad. And I didn't see that coming because I don't write really sad things. But
well, you sometimes do, Gail.
Well, this is one of them, and it's in that terrible way. But it was just quite a lovely experience. I vomited it out over 2 days.
And are you going to enter it for one of the cool South African short story competitions?
So as I was in the vomiting process, the next short sharp topic was announced, and it absolutely does not fit that one.
Okay.
So at the moment, no. But I do have a growing file of short stories that maybe one day I'll do a collection. And because the process is so different for them, I'm less compelled to publish them. I know one day I'll do something with the good ones. But there's it's an enjoyable, different writing experience because it's shorter, it's sharper, it's, for me, a vomit, whereas normally it's not. And I loved it. So lots of fun. I've had a fun writing week.
Oh, that's awesome. I hope I get to read it one day. And what have you been reading or watching or listening to lately?
So I want to talk about a book that the main reason I want to talk about it is because it's that joy of reading a book. It's a book called The Wedding People by Alison, I don't know how you say this, Espach, E-S-P-A-C-H. And I started reading it with no expectations, and it was just the most lovely book. It's about a woman who arrives at a hotel, and now this isn't going to sound lovely, but she arrives at a hotel that she's always wanted to go to, and she's there to kill herself.
Okay.
Her marriage has fallen apart. She has no hope. She's going to kill herself. Mm-hmm. She's going to take the cat's pain medication because that seems to her an efficient way. She clearly hasn't thought it out very well. Mm-hmm. And the rest of the hotel has been booked out by a wedding party. And it's kind of something's gone wrong that she's even been allowed to book a room. And the bride is horrified that there is someone in the hotel who's not part of the wedding party. And she meets up with the bride in the lift at the beginning of the book. And she says, well, you don't have to worry about me because I'm killing myself tonight. And the bride is obviously appalled and says, you're not going to ruin my wedding like that. Mm-hmm. And then it runs away from there. And it's just fun and feel good and was the most lovely read.
It sounds like Uplit, which is a genre we both have a soft spot for.
Yes, I think you would love it, Fiona. I really do.
Okay,
What
nice.
about you?
So I have been watching a series called Reservation Dogs, which is on Apple. And I think it was probably Gus Silber who first recommended it that I saw. It's a comedy drama, and it's set in Oklahoma on a native reservation. So these are American Indians, and they call themselves Indians, quite interestingly. They don't say Native American. And it's so funny. It's so full of heart. It's so specific. And it's interesting to me that they don't explain things to the audience.
Okay.
So there's this presumably mostly white audience in America, and they don't explain anything. All the sort of little cultural quirks, words that are used, beliefs, because a lot of it is almost magical realist where the culture and beliefs and religion of the community becomes part of the story in a magical way. And it's not explained. It's not dumbed down for the audience. And you pick it up. You figure out what's going on. So it's such a lovely, full of heart, specific story and so funny in places that's one I would really recommend.
That sounds absolutely lovely.
So someone else who has written a lovely, strangely feel good while also being traumatic thriller is our guest today. Our guest today is Gareth Crocker. Gareth is the author of 7 novels and 1 book of nonfiction. He's also a filmmaker and scriptwriter. Gareth's first novel was published in New York and immensely successful, an incredible bestseller. Gareth, thank you for your time and welcome.
Thanks very much for having me, ladies. It's really cool to be here.
Gareth, we're going to ask the usual starter. I think you know it. How has your writing week been?
Actually, not bad. It's weird. I find that as I'm getting older, in some cases, the writing's actually getting easier, but I think that might be because it's getting worse. But yeah, so far so good. I wear a few hats. So I'm currently writing 2 kind of proposals for film scripts, and in the evenings I'm working on my new novel.
Ooh.
And what does your daily process look like when you are working on a novel project?
Yeah, so it depends what phase I'm in. So currently we've just wrapped production on a brand new TV series, which is crazy, up at 4 a.m, months and months of work. And then all of a sudden one day you've finished filming. And now obviously we're into the next phase, and that's setting up the next project, it's a film or TV series. So that's the phase I'm currently in. So my mornings consist of working on a kind of proposal and outline for a new film we're doing. And I do that most of the day, as usual, answer emails, all that sort of stuff. And then evenings are for novel writing. My wife, bless her, is quite happy just to never see me really. So she's in the lounge with my daughter and they're watching television and I'm slaving away in front of the laptop.
Gareth, when I read up a little bit about you in preparation for this, I just got very confused because you seem to do everything. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to being a writer, how you started out and how you ended up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, okay. It started out quite theatrically with an H for maths. I was appalling at maths. And, my dad, is a very clever, financially astute person, had dreams of me becoming this accountant or whatever, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I was kind of forced into writing. There's only ever been 2 things I'm marginally good at, and that's sport. I've played sport at a reasonably high level. And the other thing is writing. I had the English teacher pull me aside one day and she said, look, if you can just stop chasing girls for 2 minutes and stop playing rugby for the other 5 minutes, then perhaps, you actually have something here. Some of the creative writing I've seen from you, there's something there. And you know what it's like. And so it's a well-trodden path, this, but you just need someone who isn't your family to tell you that, there's something there. And I think it started there. So, after that, I kind of pursued English, studied English, became a journalist. I wrote for the local community newspapers, which was terrific fun. You scuff your knees a lot, but there's a lot you learn. Moved on to the bigger newspapers, became a columnist. Then I worked in PR for a number of years, which was bloody dreadful, I can tell you. Most writers have some sort of experience with PR. That was horrible. Then I hopped across the fence and I became the spokesperson for a company, which was interesting. A lot of crazy stuff happened. We had our head office burned down once. We had multiple shootings. There was lots of drama. It's a security sector, so it was a very dramatic space. And then after that, kind of went into filmmaking formally, and we knew that for the last 10 years. But all the while, I've been kind of writing novels. So it goes back, 15, 20 years of writing novels. Tons of rejection, obviously, as we all know, and a crazy story to how it became published in the first instance. I don't know if you guys would hear
Go
that.
for
We
it.
absolutely do. That was going to be my next question. Finding Jack, how do you get an international deal for your first book straight out of the gate?
Raging naivety. That was a weird one. I'll tell you 2 quick stories. I'll try not to be too verbose. So the first one is how the story came about. So for those who I'm sure don't know, Finding Jack's a story about a soldier who finds this dog while he's at war, and he basically hatches a plan to get him back to the States once the war's over. So I was at a writing conference in America somewhere. Can't tell you where. That's my memory. Can't tell you where. And I had a couple of days off, so I sashayed up to Washington. I think it's Washington. And I went up to the Vietnam Memorial Wall. So it's this massive block of granite. It carries all the names of the soldiers who died in the Vietnam War. I was just kind of standing there as a journalist, just, taking it in. And this gentleman pulls up next to me and he's in full military kind of regalia. And, look at this as a journalist. I'm like, perhaps he served, maybe I could ask him a few questions. The next moment he produces a leash, like a dog harness, out of his jacket and he puts it at the foot of the wall. And I'm going, what's going on here? What's going on here? And I'm thinking, don't say anything, Crocker. Just leave him alone. Be respectful. Be respectful. And I'm like, hey, how are you? Just wondering what this is about. And very, very kind gentleman. And he said that he was a dog handler in the Vietnam War. And his dog had saved his life on 3 occasions. And at the end of the war, and this is a true story, all the dogs that survived were left behind. They were declared surplus military equipment by the government, and together with a lot of the munitions and the tents and all that sort of thing were just left behind. And it was heartbreaking for these dog handlers, because not only, it's family, you're in this horrible wartime situation with this animal, and you're so connected to this animal saving your life and your platoon's life. It's kind of estimated they saved the lives of about 10,000 US soldiers, and the fate that they were left with was just appalling. So this guy, every year, he comes to the memorial to, pay homage to the dog that saved his life. And I was just so taken by the story, and I couldn't believe it was real. So I decided, that's my first book. So my story is hopefully an uplifting story where a soldier gets the news that he has to leave his dog behind as they're being kind of, taken out of the war. And he says, no, he's not going to do it. So he hatches this plan to get his dog back to America. So it's that whole kind of story. So so that was the book, very poorly written to begin with. And what I did is I started sending out, I wrote the book and I sent out all these, sample chapters and synopses around the world to agents, and I just wasn't kind of getting anywhere. So
where are you at this point? In America or in South Africa?
No, back in South Africa. Yeah, back in South Africa, working, I think, as a journalist. I decided, no, I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to go and visit these literary agents that I'm not just getting through to. So single-handedly the best trip of my life that no one with a sane mind would have undertaken was to pack up a satchel full of manuscripts and head off to the UK and go door to door trying to connect with an agent. Most fun I've ever had. Walked London flat, got to meet some crazy people. I firmly suspect Jack the Ripper was a literary agent. Weird people. I'd have hands come around the door and just kind of snatch your manuscript, wouldn't even speak to you. And in one particular case, and this is where I had a bit of success, there was a big rubbish bin. Those big black wheelie bins. I think there's a green in the UK. I can't remember. And it says there on the side of the bin, it says, insert your manuscripts here, right? Straight into the bin. So I'm thinking, well, is this just a joke that you want us to throw the manuscripts away, or is it just a way for you to collect manuscripts? So it turns out it was the latter. So the agent in question wasn't home at the time. So I kind of sheepishly put my sample chapters, if you like, into the bin and left. So that night, catch a movie somewhere, and I come back to my hotel room, and so long ago, there was a little red blinking light on the phone that there was a message. So
are you sure it was the 2000s?
I'm not so sure anymore. Might have been the 70s. I don't know. So anyway, so I listened to the message, and it's this agent, and she said, look, she's had a read and she wants to meet. So I was quite excited. So next day I pull in there, and I discover that what had happened is she was out at a meeting, and she came back and she had locked herself out of her office. So while she waited for the locksmith to arrive, she was kind of bored. So she dipped her hand into the bin and pulled out my masterpiece. But what was staggering about that is that when I met with her, went into a quite cavernous office, which is surprising for London. It was big. And there were manuscripts floor to ceiling everywhere. And she said to me, wow, that's the last maybe 5 or 6 weeks of submissions that she's received from around the world. Said, had I not locked myself out of the office, I wouldn't have got to your manuscript for months and months and months. So anyway, so she was quite taken by it, which was terrific. Had one of those lovely moments where she said to me, Gareth, I love your book. I think you're really talented and all these wonderful things. Wada, wada, wada. By the way, your book starts on page 173. And I was like, I'm sorry? She said, well, that's all just waffle, really. You know, we need to get to the story. Tell the story. You're not telling the story. So then I had to go back, start the book at page 173. But then, of course, you realize that your book is 173 pages short, and you have to add on 173 pages. So effectively, it was another year of my life spent rewriting. And from there, she took the book out. We were published by a very small British publisher, and it did okay. And then I managed to, and I can't remember how, I managed to get a deal in New York.
No, you cannot do that. You cannot say, I can't remember.
For the life of me. I think I might have, no, I think she didn't like Americans. Yeah, my agent didn't like Americans. She didn't really, and you know, it was back in a time where you couldn't just email stuff around. Yeah. You had to mail. It was expensive, and it took forever, and get on the ships and all the rest. So, she just said, no, well, you know, Britain is where it's happening, and that's where we publish. But my argument was, and this is coming back to me now, my argument was, it's an American story. Surely we should try to find an American market. And she wasn't agreeing with me. So I think I then asked her if I could get an American agent, which is what I did now, I remember. And that American agent managed to land a deal with St. Martin's Press, which is that really cool, narrow building. I think it's called the Flatron Building in New York. You see it in all the posters. And Macmillan St. Martin's Press is the imprint. They operate out of there. And that's how I got Finding Jack published. And that's been a roller coaster. Yeah, that was lots of fun. I've got lots of stories around that. But let me stop talking for a bit.
And then that book got made into Reader's Digest. I don't even know what you call it.
Condensed book. It's kind of a condensed book. Yeah.
Tell us about that, because that's fascinating.
Yeah, that was great. So Reader's Digest for our older listeners, myself included.
Yes, I think explain to the listeners what Reader's Digest is.
Yeah, so it's actually really cool. What they do is they have some of the world's most talented editors, and their job is to take your full-length novel. My novels are never very long to begin with. And they condense them. And they make them into almost quite short stories, but shorter stories, kind of 100 pages or so. And they publish 4 of them in a volume. And why that's so great is that they have quite a big footprint, and they mail all these books out to the existing database, but you get to be published with, you know, the leading kind of lights of the fiction world. So, you know, my books, and I've had multiple of these deals over the years, probably about 30 or so. And what you find is your book then appears next to a James Patterson or a Lee Child, and it exposes you to new readers who wouldn't otherwise naturally have read your books. So got quite a lot of success out of that, which is fun. And the book, even to this day, every week or so, I get a message from someone about Finding Jack. So it did kind of well. Not to pat myself on the back too hard, because I got a lot wrong. The military people were on my case. They were not happy, because when I wrote that book, I didn't have enough research opportunities, really. There just wasn't enough research on the Vietnam War that I could access. The internet wasn't around, I don't think. So I would get like the gun sizes wrong, and the bullet case. Instead of a 50 millimeters, a 55 millimeter, then someone would write me a very angry letter, and I'd have to apologize. So I got a lot of it wrong, but it was a great learning curve. And lots of crazy things happened as a consequence of the book.
So is Finding Jack, would you say it's your best-selling novel?
Oh, by a country mile. I think I wrote it at the right time. I think Vietnam had been out of out of the American psyche for a while. We'd all watched Rambo and the 1,000 movies and other books had been written and so on. And I think there was a period where people were ready for it. And I think an audience who maybe didn't understand the Vietnam War that well. So I think timing had a lot to do with it. I think the emotional nature of the book had a lot to do with it. It's probably a little over sentimental now. If I read it now, it's kind of cringy in parts, definitely. But I think it just struck a nerve. And I think the other side of it is, it was a time in my life where I was very devoted to novel writing, and then kind of fairly soon thereafter, lots of other commitments crept in, families, children, stuff, life, adoption, all sorts of cool stuff. And then the filmmaking industry kind of took me over. So I was paying less attention to the books, but I'm really now back on it quite heavily. But I think basically timing was good. It was a cool story, and it was a genre that touched people. But again, lots of luck. I mean, we had some crazy stuff happen around that book. I mean, one producer, if I can tell a quick story, optioned the book for a film and created an absolute media. Can I swear? Are we allowed to swear?
You can swear.
Absolutely.
Little shitstorm in Hollywood. So what this producer did, I won't name him, he decided that he bought the rights for Finding Jack, was going to turn it into a film. Great, happy. We get paid as writers. It's wonderful. The film hardly ever gets made. But
Did you know that at the time?
Yes, I was well aware that, for every 100 books that are optioned, one of them maybe gets actually turned into film. So at least I wasn't naive about that. So anyway, one day I'm just minding my own business, and then I get a direct message on social media from Captain America, who's a Chris, one of the Chris Evans, I think it is.
Yes.
And then I think Elijah Wood, Frodo Baggins, Lord of the Rings sends me a message. I'm like, what's going on? And they're all very angry with me, and I'm going, I have no idea what's going on, and other celebs and lots of other people whose names I can't remember. So basically what had happened is the producer had decided that not only was he going to make the film, but he had announced to the press that they were going to bring back James Dean in one of the leading roles. Yes, you heard that correctly. They're going to resurrect dead iconic actor icon James Dean and make him one of the lead characters. Now, in the world of AR today, that probably doesn't sound that sensational, but back then it was like, what the hell? And it caused this massive problem in Hollywood, because all these actors were now saying, oh, really? So we're going to unwillingly, resurrect James Dean to life. He's got nothing to do with it. And they're going to actually physically recreate him on scene using another actor, obviously as a template with guarding marks. They were even going to recreate his voice from existing footage. So James Dean was going to be on screen as one of the lead characters. Now, obviously the actors had a massive uproar, the moral side of it, the ethical side of it, but not just that, the threat to their jobs as well. So now you can have a film with Elvis Presley and James Dean and whoever else you wanted. And I tell you, I got hammered. I was like, guys, I just wrote a novel. I don't even know about this. Leave me alone.
James Dean was not a character in the novel.
I swear it wasn't. So very curious. And as I said, they went on for a long time. And if you Google it now, you'll see all the articles. I mean, Hollywood Reporter, New York Times, are all going on about it. And I was just the lonely writer in the background that knew nothing about this. Anyway, the whole thing fell apart. It never got made. I think the outrage was such that it could just not be made, So it's just Finding Jack has been the gift that keeps on giving and in some cases punishing. It's been very weird.
So I had a follow-up question to that. When you do have such a successful breakout novel, it must be tempting just to stick with it, just to stay in that genre, keep on producing books about animals, about war, etc.
No, so I had a great experience with my second book. My dad, we're very close. We have a terrific relationship. So one day he said to me, Gail, calls me Gail, Gail, I've got this idea for a book. And I said, oh yeah. And he's a big fan of the Kruger Park and, all the nature, and loves going up there as often as he can. And he just had this cool idea. So I heard him out. I thought it was a great idea. And we actually kind of co-wrote my second book together. It is by no means a story I would have chosen by myself. But I don't regret it for a second, because we got to work together. It's getting on in years now, and it's something I'll cherish. So the second book was weirdly a labor of love with my dad, and it was just the most fun to write. And I'd write some chapters, I'd send them over to him, he'd have a read, and then he'd want to add this in and add that in. It was just a wonderful experience, and not an experience I think many writers get to go through. So I don't think it necessarily helped the career terribly, but that wasn't my interest at all. I just wanted to do something cool with my dad. So it's a great memory to have. And then from there, some of the other books, I wrote one or two more animal books, and then wrote some kind of sci-fi stuff. And now I'm sitting in the thriller detective genre space, which is weird in itself.
My introduction to your work was that wonderful Silver Adventure, the old people going on an adventure.
Oh, yeah.
And that was quite sad. What was that book called?
Yeah, it was called, oh man. I'm kidding. It's called The Last Road Trip.
Yes.
I remember that one. Yeah, I enjoyed writing that one. That was fun.
That one was quite zeitgeisty as well. I'm surprised that one didn't take off with the same Finding Jack energy, cause it was on trend it was around the time with that man climbing out the window book.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Silver Adventures were the thing that season.
Silver Adventures. This is the first time I've heard that. That's so cool.
Really?
Yeah. Look, I just liked the idea. So the backstory to that book was I was at some literary festival and I was sitting next to this is the appropriate word, but quite an elderly lady. She was an elderly lady, but she was fantastic and she was full of life and she was full of mischief and causing chaos at the table, and I just loved her. And we got to chatting and she said that she caused quite an uproar with her family. And she told the story. They were traveling somewhere, I think down to the Drakensberg, and they stopped at a petrol station. And the family all went off to the bathroom and to go get some snacks and all the rest. And she was left alone in the car. And a guy pulled up in a Harley Davidson and she started chatting to him. And next thing, he says, well, do you want to come for a spin? And she said, I'd love to. Yeah. So she hops on the back of the stranger's bike and off they go for 2 hours. And she doesn't tell the family. And apparently there were police called and searches and all sorts of stuff going on. She was like, that was the most fun. And I just thought, it'd be so cool to write a story about people who are approaching the last phase of, their lives, and they decide they've had enough of living in this state and going through the motions and just sitting in the giant waiting room, and decide to kind of live and address some things in their past that bother them and go on this kind of epic journey. So it's one last epic hurrah. It's that sort of thing. And there was no thinking beyond it. It wasn't like, oh, well, this will appeal to this market, the silver market. I just thought it'd be a cool story, So I wrote it, and it's one of those books that, I don't think it's had mass market appeal or anything, but the people who've read and enjoyed it really seems to have touched. And again, I get a lot of communications from people and say, this has really encouraged us to do this and to do that, or to go on a trip. And that's kind of rewarding.
So you said you've moved into the thriller space now with Now You Suffer. And it's not just in the thriller space, it's set in the South African police force. And it struck me that there's been such a drop of public confidence in the South African police at the moment. There's such a perception that corruption is absolutely rife, that things are not being investigated, that things are not being competently handled. So it must have been quite a choice to say, my detective is going to be actually a police detective working out of a police station. Did you think twice about it? What kind of went through your mind about setting a new series? Because it is the first book in a series, to set it in that kind of almost tainted space in South Africa.
Yes. So what I did is I just absolutely ignored the current reality and what people think. So no, genuinely. So it's not a commentary on where we are socially at the moment, where our policing structures are and how they're performing. Just really like, they're just detectives at a South African police station, and try to ignore all the current politics of the day. I've got to be honest about this, it's fairly generic. The detectives themselves, the police station, you could kind of pick it up and put it in another city. And I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a little bit of a design around that.
Right.
Insofar as, if it gets picked up by an American or British publisher, they'll say, well, we like the bones of the story. Can we rewrite it with a British mindset or an American mindset? And then you can do that. I think if I'd written a very political book and I'd gone into the actual realities of what's going on, it becomes a very different sort of book. So I'm saying, okay, guys, let's suspend belief for a moment. Let's just act like these detectives are pretty great and they're good at their jobs and they're committed and they love their work. And let's just go along that story. I've never been one to write particularly political books. It's not really my game. So I keep it kind of generic. More important for me is I want characters that pop off the page that are perhaps a little larger than life naturally, but that you can go along with, and they stand apart from each other and they're their own people and they're interesting and they bring different dynamics to the story, and are memorable, and you get behind them, because I think you can have a great plot, but if you have the wrong characters that are taking the reader through this journey, it just kind of all falls flat. So I always say, plot at the back of the bus, characters in the front. Get the characters right. And I said to my wife, she'll watch a show and I'll say, well, what's this episode about? And she's kind of not even really that sure, but she just loves the castle actor or the this or the that. And she's absorbed by the characters. And I think you ignore the characters at your peril. So I've worked quite hard to come up with very different characters that are relatable and cool. Then what I try to do is I try to create a plot that that gets me to stand up out of my chair. I can't just write oh, well, there's a killer and they look for him and then they find him in the end. It has to be like, there has to be a moment. There has to be, what's the big thing, guys? What's going to get me to drop the book and go, oh my shit, what just happened? So if I have those elements, I have characters that I like, and I've got a oh shit moment in the book, that I just want the book to be transferable. So, I'm shopping the book around. Hopefully we get an American deal or British deal, especially as a series. And then potentially you'd read a South African version with all the South African aspects to it. And then you'd read an American version where it's a little different. And that actually happened with Finding Jack. The British version was called Leaving Jack. Sent it over to the Americans and they said, oh, it's just too subtle. We need more things exploding. We need more people stabbed in the face. So they literally tweaked it, edited it, gave it an American kind of affectation, if you like, and gave it a different name. They said, oh, Leaving Jack sounds negative. Finding Jack sounds quite positive. So it's amazing how all these factors conspire to create your art, Very weird.
I think that sums up American publishing, that God forbid you call a book Leaving Someone.
Yeah.
It's got to be about the positive.
Especially a dog.
Absolutely. Especially a dog. Absolutely, yeah.
Gareth, you've done something quite ambitious in that you have promised us all that this is the beginning of a series and then written the first of the series. Talk to us about that decision, that you're not just embarking on one book, which is overwhelming enough often when one's at the beginning of the book, but you embarked on a whole series.
That's a weird thing. I'm quite good friends with Steve Connolly, who's the CEO of Penguin. So we were having drinks one night, and he was like, you should really write a kind of crime thriller book. And I was like, well, why? Well, Dion Mayer does really well, and we should have, Penguin should have, and I'm sure they have many. But he was kind of trying to egg me on. I was thinking, well, Steve, I don't really enjoy crime thrillers. And he's like, oh, come on. And the truth is, I don't. I mean, the reality is, your average detective thriller I find kind of a little stereotypical and a little predictable and a little hackneyed, and they follow the cookie cutter beats and the alcoholic detective and all of that. And I just thought, there's so much of it out there. A lot of it's good, I'm sure, but there's just so much. So why do I want to add my little books to it? And Steve said, well, you can bring your own voice. I thought about that. And then I figured, he's kind of right. So my detective stories, such as they are, it's kind of less about the detective work. It's more about, as I say, the characters. I want to bring real emotion to the stuff. But what I've done with this series, which is, I think, quite uncommon, there's a lot of humor in it. I've tried to make it kind of fun in a way, as fun as you can when there's serial killers and kidnapped children and so on. But there's a lot of, the early character stuff, is kind of humor based. And I really want audiences. Sorry, that's my film hat. Let me take off my film hat, put my writing and my author hat on. I want readers to connect with these people. That's kind of my secret. I want people to read the thriller and get a little tearful in parts and then be laughing at other parts. So, so I thought if I can do that and I can get book one done right and people respond well enough to it, then why not? Let's do a series. So yeah, Penguin have already got me writing the second one. They crack in the whip. And the idea is to try and put out one a year if I can keep up that sort of pace.
You can, Gareth.
Oh, have you seen the rest of my life?
Well, maybe this is the time. Tell us about the rest of your life, because there is a lot else going on.
Yeah, there is. So we've been fortunate enough to produce a number of films and TV series for the likes of Netflix and Amazon and Canal Plus and AMC in America and all these wonderful places. And how that journey started. Myself, Fred, and my other friend, Steve, who knows nothing about story or anything, who's just a great guy, came on board for the experience and to seed the project with us. So we each put in, I think, 10,000 Rand and 30,000 Rand, probably the lowest budget film ever made. And we just set about making this film. It took a couple of weeks to edit. And the next thing we knew, it was the main film Friday night, 8:00 on Mnet. And it ran and it did quite well. The second show we made was much better. It was called Shadow for Netflix. And that was their first kind of original, which is a big deal for us. And now we've just, as I say, wrapped on this massive production. It's the biggest production we've ever done. I can't really talk too much about it. We're kind of embargoed, but it's a big streamer show. And it's with a French player as well. And we even got American actors out for it. So we've spent lots of money and we're all very nervous. And hopefully it's going to be good. But it's very stressful.
Do you always write for the TV and film work you do? Do you always do the writing, or do you adapt other people's writing?
No, it's been all my work to this point. I keep telling my partners that's why we're still in business. They laugh at me and say we would be way more successful if we had better writers on board.
Nice.
No, look, I mean, it is what it is. No. So I've always just written the stuff myself. I'm doing my best to get other writers on board. So it's an emotionally draining experience. I don't take notes well. I don't take feedback well. I hate you all die, frankly. And it's tricky because, often there's a great point and you kind of have to go, kill your ego, Crocker. That's a great point. Make the change, But there's other points where, the guys perhaps, I'm not saying the guys, editors, whoever it is, they might not have as close understanding of what you're trying to do, and you don't agree with the change, and then you have to kind of push back, and it gets a bit interesting. So so it's a tough process. It is draining, but to answer your question, yes, I write all our stuff for better or for worse.
And it's been Now You Suffer has been quite widely reviewed, and I don't want any spoilers, but people do mention that somewhere in the book there is a twist. So I want to talk about writing twists. Do you plan that twist from the very beginning and write towards it? Or does it kind of come to you while you're writing? Oh, that would be such a great twist. Do you have mini twists working up towards one big twist? Or one thinks, oh, that was the big twist, but wait, there's another twist still coming. How do you plot out twists in your mind?
So I don't know about you guys, but who doesn't love a good twist, right? I mean, twists are I just absolutely adore them. So kind of, I suppose, it's twofold. I don't want to set off on a story with a plot that doesn't have a good twist to begin with. So I have to come up with a cool twist, like a vague story in my mind. And, it's hammering away in your subconscious. And then you go, oh, well, what if that happened? And then once I've got a twist that I really feel strongly about, then obviously set about writing the book and the characters, I've created. And then during the book, obviously, there'll be other moments you go, oh, okay, hold on, we can turn this on its head again. And you find other twists. But I won't start a book unless I've got like a really strong narrative thread or a really strong twist. I think Stephen King does the opposite. What Stephen King does, as I understand it, is he comes up with a great opening premise for a book. Mm-hmm. Like what if, you went to a petrol station to put petrol in your car and you went around to the bathroom, and then instead of going to the bathroom, you slipped down a slope and you landed in a river and it took you away. And that's kind of interesting. I'll write that story. Now that's great because Stephen King's openings are always so strong. Tommyknockers, all these great books, but often then he hasn't really thought about the rest of the book. I think it happened with The Stand. I think he wrote himself into a corner. He didn't know where he was going. And then he put the book away for a couple of years, and then he figured out a way to move on in the plot. Mm. So I'm not that guy. I've got to know more or less what the plot is. I've got to know what the big twist is. And I've got to set out on that journey. And of course, the book changes. And as you guys know, the characters eventually start writing the story for you, which is a terrific moment in your book. When all of a sudden you're not banging away in the dialogue, they're writing their dialogue themselves. Certainly that's been my experience, and it's so great. So like after about half the book, I go into like autopilot and the characters kind of take over, which is great. But I would be super disappointed to write 200-300 pages and go, I really don't know what to do with the story now. And that would kill me. So no, and also I don't have the time for that. So I won't start writing a story unless I think there's something really cool about it. And yes, a cool twist.
Let's talk about where you find those story seeds. Tell us your process. I mean, I know this is the worst question. I know we all want to answer like I go into the garden and I pick it from the tree of ideas. Obviously, it's not that simple. But where do you find your story seeds?
Sure, rampant theft and plagiarism, really. No, it's weird. And my wife doesn't believe me when I tell her this, but I get my ideas when I go to the cinema. So I switch off the phone, dark room. I'm normally alone in the cinema because cinemas dying, very, very sad. Go to a morning show, empty cinema, and you sit there and you watch. And while I'm watching, obviously I'm watching the story, but there's another part of my mind that's working. And often I'll come up with an idea for something that is completely different to what's on the screen. But it's kind of a sanctuary, a space where there aren't all these other demands, where you can kind of put your life on hold and just go to movies. So I'm forever that weirdo going into the movies by himself, and people go, shame he has no friends. But that's kind of my space. So, I mean, the current thriller that I'm writing, I got the idea while I was watching a horror movie the other day. And I was like, oh, that'd be so cool. And it's just, that's really where I go. There's other times, of course, and other experiences, working on film sets, you meet so many different people from different walks of life. And someone will just say something to you and you'll go, well, that's interesting, and it's we all thieves, us writers. We just steal from other people's lives. So yeah, I think, weirdly, an empty cinema weirdo sitting in the corner coming up with ideas. That's me.
I'm so interested in that because that's what's happening to me with podcasts, that I'll be listening to a podcast in the background, in the foreground, and at the back of my mind, something's going on with the writing. And suddenly I'll realize I'm not listening to the podcast anymore at all. I'm plotting a book. And it's a similar, listening to one creative output leads you to another. It's so interesting.
Gareth, I was so interested in what you said about that advice you got of the book actually starts on page 173. Because one thing that's very striking about your books is how little fat and filler there is. They get right into the meat of the story. The emotional stakes are very high from the very beginning. There's no padding whatsoever. The story moves ahead at an absolute breakneck pace. Was that the advice that did it for you? Or is that something that you've got better and better at over the years?
Well, thank you for that. That's very kind. I sometimes wonder if it's a failing of mine, actually. I think sometimes I underwrite. Once on one of my many rejection slips back in the day, I was told you're overwriting. And I think that comes from a lack of confidence. So often we want to show off and we're like, look at this wonderful passage that I can write. I can describe a tree for 9 pages and you'll know everything about it. And then you start to realize, well, stop trying to show off and just tell a story. And I think some writers can get bogged down in that. I think authors generally, and readers often, will skip through that a little bit. They'll go, oh, it's a meadow. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, it's a meadow. Yes, I know it's a meadow. Can we just get to the story? So I think you have to always bear in mind what your story is. And my biggest fear is just boring people. So Bill Bryson, I haven't read him in a while, but when I was reading him back in the day, he was so good at just, and maybe he kind of overwrites a bit, but occasionally he would just have one sentence that did the job of 20 sentences. He would say, the mist was so thick I could kick holes in it. And then you didn't have to go on about the mist. Everyone's like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I try and keep my descriptions down to the bare minimum, but try and make it impactful so it builds a picture. And as we know, writing a book and reading a book, it's team sport. So I always see it as a baton. I've got a baton, right? I'm running with a baton. Then I hand the baton over to the reader and I say, okay, I've given you something. Make up the rest of it yourself, right? I want to give them the leeway to imagine some of that. So if there's a horrible basement lair where someone's been held captive, I'm not going to give you everything. I'm not going to tell you always what they're wearing. I'm not going to tell you what lights are in the room necessarily. I want you to create a bit of that yourself because ultimately what is reading? It's a world of imagination. And I don't think the author should dictate too much of that space. It's the same reason why a lot of novelists choose not to describe the physical attributes of their lead characters. They want the audience to have this vision. And that's why people get so upset when a film's made and it looks nothing like the person they envisaged. And sometimes that's their own fault, really, because they've created a character that never existed in the book.
You've gone into quite a dark place with writing this thriller. I mean, as I said, the ocean moment at the beginning of this book, and it's fascinating to me. How do you get yourself as a writer to write such a scary opening scene, have such a scary premise without scaring yourself off the writing?
Weirdly, it doesn't affect me at all. Maybe I'm a psychopath. I think I'm a psychopath. Yeah. It doesn't really affect me. I just, I know it's all an illusion. It's all construct. I know it's not really happening. I won't write about true life crime. That scares me. That saddens me. What's happening, in the Middle East at the moment, that is the real horrors in the world. The made up kidnappers, the made up abductions, the missing children in the fictional space, I can deal with. What I can't deal with is seeing what's really happening in the world. So a lot of the true life crime stuff I won't watch. I'll happily watch The Exorcist or Smile 2, which is a terrific film, by the way. Smile 2, here's a pun for you guys. Well done. Because I know it's art. I know, you can almost see the zipper up the monster's spine, but in the real world, there are no zippers, and that's truly frightening for me. So no, actually, I have no problem doing all sorts of horrible things to my characters.
And then your readers have to deal with feeling like it's real.
So you said that characters are at the front of the bus, and your characters in Now You Suffer are so interesting, especially Reuben and Melissa. They are larger than life. I mean, Reuben himself is 2 meters tall. He's built like a front row forward. He's immensely strong. He's immensely capable. And Melissa is incredibly intuitive. I mean, she makes these sort of intuitive leaps and bounds that are really quite extraordinary. So did you create these really larger than life characters so that they would have the strength to bear the whole series forward. And also Xander as the sidekick. He's also very interesting. What were you doing there? Because they aren't, as you said, the sort of alcoholic detective. They're almost superheroes in a way.
Yeah. So Alfred Hitchcock, I think, said it best. He said, if it's a comment of the time, so one must be careful. But I think he was saying that, if a woman spends her day, doing the housework and she's in the kitchen, she's washing dishes, she doesn't want to go and watch a film where someone's doing the housework and doing the dishes. So I've always wanted to create a bit of separation from our normal lives. So I don't mind the fact that the characters are a little larger than life. There's a fine line to be had. You don't want to take it too far. But I think if you're going to sustain a series and you want people to come back to those characters, they can't be too mundane. They just can't be too plain. And I've read quite a few critiques lately of some big literary novels. I'm not a huge literary novel person, but a lot of the critiques are like, okay, I get it. It's beautifully written. It's well told. It's interesting, but I just can't stand these characters, just kind of kill me. And you can't get away with that if you're writing a series. So if I'm going to be stuck with these characters and they're going to be stuck with me for a while, then I want to enjoy them and I want to be able to do fairly outlandish things with them. And also I need to love writing them, and writing Melissa as this brilliant person who's just capable of so much and so interesting and weird looking and odd. It's fun. It's just fun. And it has to be fun when I sit in front of the laptop. If it's not fun, it's kind of death. And then, your book's going to suck and no one's going to want to read it. So if you as the first reader aren't enjoying it, you don't have a hope in hell.
So, Gareth, what have you been reading or watching or listening to lately that you've enjoyed or want to tell us about?
Well, I'm about to blow an enormous amount of smoke towards you ladies. I've actually been listening to your podcast religiously, and I've just got to tell you, because no one else I've heard say this, but what I love about your podcast, and congrats, really, it's so nice to hear all these South African authors talk about the experiences. I've learned so lot. I've learned so lot about this. I've learned so much. It's nice to hear fellow authors going on their journeys and their struggles and so on. But what you guys do so well is you allow people to speak. What drives me mad is you watch these American shows where there's these late night hosts and you can see it's all about them. They just want to talk and the guest is there, but look at me, it's just so horrible. And I always just want to say to them, will you just shut up and please let the last person talk? You guys are so good at doing that. So thank you. And I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
Thank you.
So your podcast. And then I've been, and I'm going to refer to my phone quickly. I've been listening to, because I don't get a chance to read that much because I'm so busy. So my reading is on the road. So I've listened to audiobooks. Wave Walker by Suzanne Haywood. So Wave Walker, guys, is crazy. It's a horror story, but not told as a horror story. Told as a frolicking adventure of a family who goes sailing around the world on a boat and all the wonderful experiences they have. The writing underneath the writing, it's a complete and utter nightmare. It's a story of this couple who take their very, very young British children out of England and they sell up the family hotel, whatever it is, and they buy this crappy boat, and they decide to reenact Cook's third voyage, trying to find the Northern Passage or something. I don't know, something ludicrous around the world.
Isn't this a true story? Based on a true story. I've read about this.
So this is an actual story of what this young child endured. So it's her recollection of those days. I think she set off at 5-6 years old with her parents. But now imagine the scenario. You have a life, you just started school, you've got friends, you've got a community, a family. And your dad arrives home one day and says, listen, guys, we're selling the family hotel. I've bought this crummy boat and we're going to travel around the world. And obviously they're young kids. They think this is a bit of a joke. And it turns out not to be a joke. And they go for years and years and years away in the ocean. And it's a nightmare because it's reckless. It's irresponsible. This boat is dodgy. They sail the wrong way around the world. So they encounter the headwinds and it's just the totally wrong approach and super reckless. And it's the story about how this young girl has to survive the trauma of living, on a 20 square meter vessel, have no friends, have no interaction, have no education. And over the years, how she fights to educate herself. And it's so inspiring. So they'll dock somewhere and then she'll try to connect with the teacher and try to get some course material. And she'll say, well, can you send the next assignment to the next port and I'll collect it in 3 months and I'll do it. And she goes on this epic journey to educate herself. And her parents are kind of, I don't want to be too judgmental, but crazy people, utterly crazy people. I mean, at one point they caught up in the storm. They nearly died. The boat nearly sinks. She gets hit on the head by, some falling wood. They have to do brain surgery on an island with a guy who isn't even a proper doctor. And it's just like they drill into her head. And it's this poor girl. And what gets you so much about the way it's written, it's so cleverly written by the author, is that she's telling it without any judgment. So she's telling it dispassionately. She's saying, well, and then this day, then the boat got stuck on these rocks, and then we waited 3 days. And she doesn't go, oh my Lord, it was so harrowing, and then I didn't know what to do. She was just like, dispassionately, like she's disconnected from herself. And the more you listen, the more you think this is an utter horror story. But it's so engaging. And spoiler alert, she does survive in the end, but carries the scars and then has to write this book and, you know, in a way throw her parents under the bus, I guess, and have to come to terms with the fact that she has to acknowledge this horrendous journey that she went along, and how the dad, it's obviously a dream of his, but how he gets kind of lost in this perverse notion, and then he lands up just staying at sea for almost forever. It goes on for years and years and years. And she's a grown woman, I think, by the time she eventually, you know, is able to leave this boat, this prison. It's a compelling read, guys. Wave Walker.
I'm not going to read it. It sounds far too frightening for me. I'm traumatized listening to you talk about it.
But it's written so kindly. It's just this wonderful adventure that isn't, you know.
Well, Gareth, we hope everyone checks out Now You Suffer. It's out now by Penguin Random House, out in time for Christmas. It's a wonderful read. I can see from the reviews that people are enjoying it immensely. So we wish you all the best with that. And thank you so much for coming to chat to us.
And I was going to say it's a put aside a weekend. Like, don't start it when you've got an important work thing to do that's going to interrupt. It's a clear some time, put it aside, because you're going to want to go quickly through the trauma of the beginning, and not have to sit with that in the back of your head.
Well, thanks very much, guys. It's been a joy to write, and the second one's coming along nicely, and hopefully people support the book. And you know what it's like. It's a miracle if people buy your books. I put out a little video, just as a quick aside. I put out a little video a week or two ago, and I just walked with my cell phone through a bookstore, and I just filmed the books. And I was going like, okay, so to be a novelist, it's kind of crazy, because not only do you have to sell your book, right? I mean, someone has to go in there and buy your book, but they have 50,000 choices, right? It's like running the 100 meters against every athlete that ever lived. You know, it's just so difficult being a novelist, and they don't have to do it once. I mean, your book has to sell in numbers for you to be successful. So it's such a tricky thing. So to those readers out there who buy South African books and believe in South African fiction, we love you guys. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can keep writing this crazy story, this crazy series. And I can promise readers one thing: I'm not going to go with all the conventional tropes. We're going to do some cool stuff. So yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
Gail, Gareth is a huge amount of fun to talk to, isn't he?
So much fun, so much laughing. I could have spoken to him all day. I know I keep saying it, but the season has been amazing. Everybody has been so amazing, and Gareth was yet another magnificent one.
He really was. And what did you get out of it in particular?
I wrote reams of notes, but I think the thing that fascinated me the most was what the story he told us about having a UK agent, which is a dream. But when she wouldn't sell it in America, he pushed. He didn't go, oh, okay, you're the wise one. You know, I've been really lucky to have this success. He pushed and he did what he believed was right for his work. And I think that that's a very hard thing to do. And I think it's something to learn from. And I think it's something maybe men are better at than women for all the societal reasons, and white men are better at than black men for all the societal reasons. But it's something we need to learn. We need to learn to go, that is not the end of the road for my book. This is the right move for my book, and I'm going to do it whether you like it or not.
Yeah, because he essentially said, okay, you won't sell my book into the US. Can I get an American agent and get that person to do it? And he made that happen. And that was the making of the book. That's why Finding Jack was such an absolute runaway success.
And if he had been a different person, he wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, he would have just accepted that the person in the industry knew better than he did.
I mean, I think he is one of these people that he does not let other people's expectations stand in his way. I found that very inspiring. What about you, Fiona?
I was so struck by what he said about putting your characters at the front of the bus, because I think I'm inclined to put the plot at the front of the bus and the characters must come along. But especially with writing a series, which is something I've tried to do in the past, he was saying that you need strong characters, strong enough to carry a series. And the kind of feeble wife has left him alcoholic detective, he didn't feel was strong enough to carry his series forward. So he created these two characters that are so larger than life and such fun to watch on the page. It's like, oh, the shiny, lovely thing is back. I want to watch it doing its thing on the page. And I think there's such a good lesson in there for creating a character that's strong enough and has the legs to carry a series.
Fiona, what you just said, the shiny, lovely thing is back. I want to watch it on the page is often how I feel writing when I've taken to a particular character. And I'm like, oh, I get to write this character again. And it's interesting to think, how does that play out for the reader?
Yes, I think as a reader, we both also know that experience of seeing the nice thing come back and then suddenly you energized and you want to keep reading because it's such fun.
Absolutely.
So if you have read Gareth's books, if you have any comments on the new ones, if you have any writing questions for us or comments about what we've been talking about, please get in touch. We're on all social media across the board.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.